What's up, everybody? Welcome back. This is Chris, and this is my Bloodborne lore. So real quick, before I start with the lore, or what I think is going on, the video is kind of just showing you me quitting on the lore on Dark Beast, because he was an asshole. And he's one of the reasons why this video is taking so long. The other reason was because of work, and I had an audit I had to go through and stuff like that. But he is the other reason. So I quit on him. His little dungeon's still open. I'm going to go back to him, and I'm going to kick his ass. But first, I'm going to go do some other stuff. I decided to open up another, a root dungeon to kind of, I guess, show that off while I'm talking about all this stuff. Really, a root dungeon is the dungeons that kind of change every time you open up a new one. And that's where you really get some of the good stuff. So you'll see me get some good ruins, I think, out of it. But anyways, enough of that. Let's get right into the lore. So last time we ended with the Gurman being the first hunter of the dream, and Old Yharnam being burnt down, and more than anything, the beginning of the turmoil in the Great Yharnam area, which I'm guessing I'm calling it that. It's like the Yellow Pages, the Greater Yharnam area. But let's look more into the history of Cainhurst and the Healing Church, because I think talking about them a little bit, and I talked about them a little bit last episode, but I think talking about them a little bit more, kind of the relationship, will help things down the road a little bit. Just like understanding blood kind of helps make sense of everything that's going on. So last episode I talked about the Healing Church. They knew of the contract they made with the Moon Presence. They were the ones who used the cord to create it. And the cord, I'm talking about the 1/3 umbilical cord, or the cord of the eye and whatnot. Because remember, Lawrence beckoned the moon, and that's what it said in that note. So in fact, it's highly possible that Lawrence was the one who gave the forbidden blood to Cainhurst in the first place. Remember that Alfred told us that it was a scholar from Byrgenwerth who betrayed them and brought Cainhurst the forbidden blood. And the only other time you hear the word really betrayed is when Willem is talking to Lawrence in the cutscene. He's saying, I already know you betrayed me or whatnot. And Lawrence is like, no, no, I didn't. But I think it's because Lawrence thinks he's doing the right thing, and that's why he says, no, I didn't betray you. I think he thinks in his mind he's doing the right thing, or he thinks he knows what he's trying to do. So that's kind of one of those things, you can make that connection. You may not have been Lawrence that brought it at all to Cainhurst, but I think those connections and words and stuff like that really tie them two together. So going with that, now that doesn't mean like Lawrence went to Cainhurst and then just chilled there. Right? He didn't like go to Lawrence, was like, here's some blood, let me chill with y'all. No, I think in fact he kind of went there and then he gave him the blood and then he came back to Byrgenwerth, right? In the cutscene, Willem, like I said that he knows you betrayed. He says, I already know you betrayed me. Like, it already happened, right? Willem already knew it happened. So that either means that Willem is smart enough to think things through in the future, or that it happened already and Willem knew about it, and Lawrence was trying to keep it a secret, but Willem's like, I already know, man, you already did that dastardly deed. And Lawrence is already at Byrgenwerth again still. So remember, at the end he says, okay, I'm gonna take my leave, I'm getting out of here. So the thing is like Byrgenwerth, as you play through the game, you learn that as much as it was a place of learning and like, all this stuff, they were learning through experimentation, or that's what it at least looked like. If you look at a lot of the enemies in that area, they were like part human and then their head was like something else, right? It's very like kind of like a scary experimentation stuff going on. They consider it like the College of Byrgenwerth. You think of like this higher and mighty like knowledge and great stuff going on there, but in reality it wasn't so great. At least in our world it wasn't so great. To them it may have been the greatest thing in the world, but to us it's not so much. We're kind of like, you guys are weird. You guys are experimenting on people and whatnot, right, to create those monstrosities that are there. And most of those monsters were people at once. So Lawrence probably was experimenting. Maybe he was experimenting when he brought that blood over to Cainhurst. Not just to give them something, but maybe he wanted to see what would happen, right? There always were like, beware the old blood, beware the old blood. Maybe Lawrence was like, why? So he went over to Cainhurst and he was like, here's some blood, Cainhurst. And then he wanted to see what would happen. Since he knew the old adage, he wasn't going to do that in Byrgenwerth, right? He knew that people were afraid for it, so he was like, oh, maybe I'll try it somewhere else. So in a way, if Lawrence comes from a place of experimentation where they do scary stuff like that, it wouldn't be too far out of the realm for him to actually do that to a whole city, or a whole castle, I guess you could really say. And then remember, their Forsaken Castle, Cainhurst. So maybe that's what he was doing. Maybe that was his whole point, or his idea behind giving them the forbidden blood. Wasn't necessarily to befriend them or be their buddies, but in reality, maybe he did it because he just wanted to experiment. He was a scholar, and then after he experimented with them a little bit, he realized something. Now that's kind of speculation, but here's kind of what I think. So Lawrence thinks blood is the key to reaching the status of Great Ones, right? However, there are going to be people who can accept the blood and those who are going to turn into beasts. I think this is what he's starting to realize. He realized at Cainhurst that there were people who didn't just turn into beasts. There were people who actually survived and was fine. There were people who also turned. But he knew that there were people that were okay too. He knows that you have to be wary, right, of those who will turn. So that's kind of where he gets the idea of the hunters to come into play. He knows that when he decides to finally start the healing church or whatnot, he knows that he's going to need hunters to take care of the ones that turn into beasts. I think in his mind, sooner or later, through survival of like the strongest, right, that idea of evolution, that the people that have the ability to survive with the blood will live long and prosper, because the hunters will be taking out everyone who can't. So in his mind, I think he's trying to create the evolution of human beings to becoming these great ones, and he's using it by using blood. The church chant, remember, says seek blood, seek the old blood, but at the same time it says be wary of the weak human minds, you must fear it. So to him, I believe he thinks he can cure, the best way I can say this is Lawrence thinks it's not that he can cure people of diseases and poor health, but he's actually curing the human race. He thinks that by doing what he's doing, he's going to make the humans better. He's going to cure this idea that the evolution will continue in human beings. Not really much different than what Willem is trying to do, honestly, but he is doing it in a much riskier way. And then if you remember that note in the lecture hall, that there will be no evolution without courage, and that's what Willem stated. So maybe he's taking that kind of to a whole new level, because Willem's doing it with eyeballs. And like I said, we'll talk about him. We'll talk about Bergenworth soon. But right now, we're trying to get this basis of what Lawrence is and what he's doing and what's his purpose. He does luck out, however, that this blood does have healing properties, and it helps bring people around the world who are sick to his place, to his area, I guess you could say. And that's where you get all these foreign people from coming in from everywhere. It's very interesting. Now, did Lawrence know that? He might have, because he placed it in Cainhurst. So he may knew that it had healing properties, and that's where he got the idea of a healing church. It's all really like a cover-up or a front to what he's really trying to do. That's kind of a lot of speculation, right? And it doesn't really root itself in anything. But I try to explain a little bit through what's kind of going on in the words and the different notes and stuff like that. I mean, it's not that far-fetched, I don't think. To be honest, it doesn't seem like it to me. Especially the way the healing churches throughout the game, they don't seem to be the greatest organization in the world. They don't seem to really be into healing people as much as it seems like, right? So really, I guess the other thing to think about is, what is the forbidden blood? Whose blood is that? Is it just random blood that you find in Labyrinth, or is it a specific blood that we keep hearing, this forbidden blood, what is it? Well, one of the third chords kind of answers this for us, and it's the one I think I do it at the beginning of this episode that you're watching, but I end up going back and finally getting it. You get it from Arianna, and it's the Lady of the Night. When she finally, after you kill Mikolash, she has a baby, and it's a little baby celestial one being thing that you see up in the upper cathedrals if you ever go in that secret area. What it says on that third chord is, it says all the usual stuff, but in the middle, the difference is every great one loses its child and then yearns for a surrogate. In Oedon, the formless great one is no different. To think it was corrupted blood that began this eldritch liaison. So corrupted blood. You get this, like I said, you get this chord off Arianna after you kind of complete her quest, quote unquote, her quest. We know that Arianna has this sweet, blood that was once forbidden. It says when you get her blood vial, and we do know that the Vilebloods consider their blood corrupt. This chord kind of connects that, right? You get this from her, basically, or her kin, I guess you can say, and it says that it's corrupted blood, and we know that her blood was once forbidden. So to me, the blood of Oedon was the one that was brought to Cainhurst to begin with. It seems to be the blood that's used everywhere. The healing church has areas named after it. I said that in the last episode. The Vilebloods were introduced to the same thing, and it doesn't seem to be that big of a big of an idea, right? Because we know that in Cainhurst people were turning into beasts. We know that in Yharnam people are turning into beasts. So it doesn't seem to be that far-fetched that this is the same blood. So really Aedon's blood is the culprit of all this. This means that he is also the culprit behind the Hunter's Dream. Because if they made a contract with anyone, they made it with him. And he seems to really be the only one where he's formless and he has a voice, right? He seems very mysterious. To me, I really think that Aedon is the moon presence, and I believe that he is. Because remember, when we first see the moon presence, if you ever get to that ending, he kind of appears out of nowhere, right? Maybe this whole time he was only formless because he wanted to be. Or maybe he can only produce himself inside of his own dream area, because you don't see him anywhere else but inside the Hunter's Dream. So he seems to be the person that they made this contract with, and it kind of helps me. Well, it doesn't help me explain my story, but it helps explain what kind of goes on later on and why he's the one that does it. And this kind of leads to the end of the last episode. So all that stuff was kind of just explaining some things that I wanted to talk about before the last episode, which is Old Yharnam now is destroyed. It doesn't happen overnight, I don't think, right? I think Old Yharnam slowly gets itself destroyed, that these beasts are turning, and there was nothing that they could do because they didn't have enough hunters to deal with it. They didn't know this was going to be such a big deal. And I think afterwards, the Healing Church was kind of in disarray. I don't think Lawrence was ready for what he was doing, and I think it hurt them, and it really hurt them because I think people started realizing the plague of the beasts, and that all these people were finally that they're not healed as much as they think they're healed. However, now as long as these nights of these specific hunts happen, everything doesn't seem to ever go as bad as Old Yharnam, because they made a contract. Contract is something where, you know, you get something, but you got to give something in return. And it's not, I mean, I guess some contracts could be, if you're dumb, you can make a contract and not get anything. I guess that's bad business. But in reality, a good contract, I guess you could say, is something where you give something a little bit and you get something in return. So what I'm really thinking is this contract, like I think I mentioned in the last episode, was really something Lawrence and his associates, quote unquote, his associates, could be the choir, right? Could be the Healing Church's associates. He really makes this contract, and he decides that, hey, you can have your night of the hunts, right? And in return, we want to become, you know, greater, right? That's really kind of, I think, the basic contract of what's going on. And then the moon presence is basic, you know, he has a voice. He can't show himself, but he has a voice. He's basically like, all right, and I'll give you, you know, he says, I'll make sure I'll take care of the beasts that appear as long as you let me do this, right? Because the moon just wants a kid, right? This whole game, all you know is that there's kind of like this procreation thing that wants to happen. There's babies kind of gets thrown in your face everywhere. You get enough insight, you start hearing it crying and all this other stuff, right? So it seems like these great ones just want to have kids. They want to procreate, and we kind of want to evolve. Not necessarily do we want to procreate. We can procreate all day. We're humans. We're able to do that. But what we want is to evolve. So we kind of got a thing, you know, you help me out, I help you out. So that's kind of what happens. So every so often now the moon would come down, you know, try to have kids. He would have a special hunter chosen that would help kill the beasts, and then the church would be there to kind of reap the benefits of it, right? And they would be the ones that keep producing these people with the blood for the moon to end up having these kids with, right? The moon can't do that, but the people can. The church can. So the church, the basis of the church is that, you know, we'll give you the people with the blood. You come down and make us awesome. So the night, you know, wouldn't ever get as bad as Old Yharnam now. And this is the night, and I always say, like, the night, I think this is kind of the start of the dream, right? The night of the hunt, the moon would come down, and maybe even so much as the moon's like, you know what, I'll make it even seem like a dream when I come down. Maybe that's just the side effect of his power. I don't know. You can't really say one or the other, but for the most part, you know, this feels like a dream. And then that the next day people kind of don't realize what happened. It could be even to the extent that even if they lost someone, they don't even know, right? They can't even remember that it happened. Who knows what that extent of that dream is? We know only thing we kind of can get from it is we see nightmares in the game. We know that there's a hunter's dream, so we know that these kind of dreams do really exist. And then that if you get the one ending, you end up back in Old Yharnam. Just seems like everybody's gone in that cutscene. So it just seems like whenever the hunt is over, everything kind of just goes back to normal. And for a while it was working fine. The chosen hunter would hunt the beasts of the night, making it safe for him to go down there and impregnate the women, make it safe for the people, right, so that the church could keep making these people. And then from the game we can see that it didn't take long for these babies to appear. I mean, Arianna is kind of like boom, in one hunt night she had a kid, and then we just kind of killed it. So it doesn't seem like it takes very long for this to happen. And then after he comes down and he does his deed and the women get pregnant, or the chosen women get pregnant, I guess he kind of runs off, and if he fails, he fails and the night ends, right? I don't think he cares too much about success. I think he just cares about trying each time until finally he can get one to happen. And I think that's kind of the way the game is played out, and that's why you get these cycles of the hunt. And I think it's to show that because they're so great, that these beings are so great, quote unquote great, that it's very hard for them. It's very, 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 very difficult for them to procreate. And it's also very difficult because we're not kin to them, right? We are not one of them. A regular human, it'd be like, trying to mate a lizard with a lizard with like a panda bear. It just wouldn't happen, right? It may, genetically, maybe after try after try, probability probably states very low probability that it could happen, but it's probably such a low possibility that it just wouldn't, right? It's kind of the same idea, not a very good analogy, but kind of the same thing, right? That these kind of two different species are trying to procreate with each other to create something new or something better. However, we aren't kin to it, so I believe also we try to start becoming kin to it, and I think that's kind of what the choir and them are starting to do, and that's the same with Bergenworth. What they're kind of thinking about is that we need to be closer to them if we ever want to procreate with them. And I think that's kind of maybe the mindset behind some of the great ones, is that we'll let you become closer to us if it helps us have a kid. That's kind of another thing. We'll talk about that, I think, in other episodes or something like that, or I'll get into it a little bit more. But that's kind of how this enlightenment is going to be taken in, right? The closer we are to becoming them, the more likelihood they're able to procreate with us. If we don't do that, then you're just going to have to take a shot in the dark. And like I said, I don't think the Moon President was so much worried about, I mean, he wanted to be successful, obviously, but in reality, he probably failed a bunch of times. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So the frequency of these cycles, I don't really know how many they happen. I mean, it seems like in the game that they frequently happen. What's also interesting is it's like it's a dream inside a dream. No, there's a cycle inside like another cycle. So the one cycle we get are the hunt cycles. The hunts happen, they end, they happen, they end. Okay, simple thing. Now there also seem to be cycles of like civilizations, right? We know of at least 3 civilizations that exist: the Thumerian one, Loran, and then the one we're in right now. At least, right? We don't know if there's been more than that. We don't really know exactly, right? Could each chalice be a different civilization? It's possible, right? That makes sense, right? There could be like an is civilization, Loran. The Hinter tombs seem more like they're tombs, and I think if you read the chalice, it's supposed to be like the outer perimeter of the labyrinth or something, so maybe not that one. Then you got the Thumerian chalice, so it could be possible, right, that these are different eras of time and different civilizations that existed and knew about the Great One, and what happened to be in one of them called Yharnam. So something named after the last one, after the last queen of the Thumerian one. So it's very interesting to see that there's a cycle of like civilizations that kind of just have this downfall. So that might mean that this could ultimately lead to the destruction of civilization trying to become this evolved form. But at the same time, is it something worth trying? Remember, again, evolution, only happens with courage, or whatever Wundt said. And then you have the cycle of just the hunts inside the time frame that you're in. Not really known how many, like I said, but it seems like it happened a lot. And that might be why there's so many caskets around the dream version of Yharnam, to kind of show that, this is really a city of death. There's not much, as much as it's a healing. You're dealing with something called the healing church and the blood administration. Then you enter the game, and all there is coffins everywhere. And you're like, wow, this looks cool. But then if you really think about it, you're like, if this is such a healing church, why is everyone dead, right? And it's really because it's a place known for healing and blood administration, but in reality, it's just a breeding ground for the Great One, and with that comes a lot of death. But that's how you attain enlightenment, right? So, at least in this game, that's how you attain enlightenment. It's very, just very interesting kind of look to it and whatnot. So for a while, hunters who were chosen and hunted by, I guess you can say Gurman was the first hunter, right? So he wasn't immediately a caretaker of the hunter's dream. In fact, that's his area, right? So it's very possible he was the first hunter. And the way he hunted was, it seemed like with the uniform and the armor that you get, it was dark, it's hidden from sight, you know, you're at night. You would use the weapons from the hunter's workshop, which were very, you know, rigid saws and all this like very I won't say generic, but you know, old school looking armor. It looks like someone kind of pieced it together, right? It's not something that looks like it's been forged in reality. It looks like someone literally took like metal, and it looks like I want to say an amateur made it, but someone that, you know, was just doing this, you know, as like just a thing, like a hobby almost, but it works. You know, these are good weapons throughout the game, you can use them, but they just seem old and different than when you get into Ludwig, which we'll talk about here in a second. So these people, you know, they may have posed as hunters and then created workshops like the powder kegs. Those people may have existed, but because those posed hunters, they weren't part of the hunter's dream, they weren't part of what Gurman was doing, they may have been considered heretics. And I think you get, I'm trying to think if there was the other heretics. I thought there was another heretic other than the powder kegs that were kind of maybe Archibald, or no, was it Archibald or was it the other guy, Relevant Izzy or whatever? They kind of were considered heretics too, because maybe they weren't part of what the people who were from the hunter's dream were doing. And like I said, we'll talk about that in a minute. So Gurman was doing this like the old school way, and it seemed to work for a while. But after a long time, here comes Ludwig of the Holy Blade. To me, with every cycle of the hunt, it seemed like the beasts started getting more and more hideous. The beasts, and it seemed not only that the beasts were getting stronger, but they were getting stronger because they were mutating, or they were changing, or whatever, deformed from people who didn't seem like they were going to, right? So you have a lot of insight. You have people with a lot of insight, maybe like it says the clerics of the church, who might understand a little bit more than the regular person does about what's going on, maybe understanding, having a little more idea of like the eldritch truth and all that stuff. And that kind of halted them from turning into a beast for a long time, but eventually even they turned into beasts. And you know, you kind of get that with Henrik's clothing and stuff, that, you know, like it's almost bad to live too long, because if you do, you're going to turn into something even worse than what like just the regular people were probably turning into. So Ludwig of the Holy Blade, he decides to create the church workshop, and here's some like items that really pertain to him. So you got the sword hunter badge. It said Ludwig was the first of many healing church hunters to come, many of whom were clerics. As it was, clerics transformed into the most hideous beasts. Then you have Yharnam's hunter garb. Ludwig, the first hunter of the healing church, once recruited Yharnamites to serve as hunters. The hunter's attire was made for new recruits and has excellent straightforward defense, but not nearly enough to allow an ordinary man to stand any real chance against the beasts. And then his Ludwig's Holy Blade says a trick weapon typically used by the healing church hunters. It is said that the silver sword was employed by Ludwig, the first hunter of the church. When transformed, it combines with its sheath to form a greatsword. It exhibits several departures from the workshop's design, suggesting that the church anticipated much larger, inhuman beasts. I believe Ludwig was one of the chosen hunters, so this was long after Gurman's stay as the first hunter. In fact, there could have been a couple of people in between him and Ludwig. Who knows, right? But right now, because of what's going on, and because it says that the church anticipated much larger inhuman beasts, it's very interesting to think that not only did they anticipate that these beasts and these clerics were turning into these hideous beasts, maybe they started thinking about hunting kin the great ones, and maybe other great ones themselves, to help with the idea to become kin themselves. So maybe that's why they had this deter. And then it says it was several departures from the workshop design. So that tells you that it wasn't like they went from the workshop to the church workshop. No, there was the workshop, and maybe some things down the line, and then you have what happened at the church workshop. I believe, like I said, I believe Ludwig was one of the chosen ones, and that's the whole idea behind that. They were chosen heroes back in the day. That these guys were chosen. It doesn't say chosen heroes. It says just a line of heroes, or line of ancient heroes is what it talks about. And I think really that shows that these people were special in some way, because that's what really heroes are. And it says an ancient line of heroes, so it's one after another that these people would appear. It kind of just gives the idea that these were chosen guys, that these are a line of chosen guys down the line. So Ludwig would recruit really, he would recruit hunters, and then he created bigger weapons to handle bigger beasts. That's really what you kind of take away from these things, because he's fighting something bigger. He needs more people, so he would recruit people from the city itself, and he would say, "Hey, you can be a hunter." And I guess he maybe taught him some things. He gave him these new hunter attire, and I think it's just very interesting because it says that it wasn't nearly enough to allow ordinary man to stand any real chance against the beast. So that tells me the two things. One, he treated them as fodder, and he was basically like, you guys attack, and then I'll come in and do the actual killing, right? So he could, maybe it means that, or maybe he trained them in the way of the hunters, Germon's technique, learning the art of quickening and whatnot. So it could be both. Maybe he taught these guys that, this is how you be a hunter. This armor ain't gonna help you unless you know how to do this, because you wear the same armor, but you stand against the beast very well, because that's how to dodge and all that good stuff, right? The ordinary person wouldn't know how to do that. So either, like I said, he gave them that armor and they just got slaughtered, because he would come in and then do like attack from the side or back or whatever. He used them as fodder, or he actually trained them and he used them efficiently. As a hero, I would say he probably leaned more to actually training them. Otherwise, I don't think people would see him as a hero. And really, whose eyes are you seeing him as a hero from, I guess, is the next question, right? Frame of reference is very important. From the church view, if it doesn't matter if he uses them as fodder or not. He could still be a hero to the church. But if it's a regular civilian, or a Yarmanite that's calling him a hero, then I don't think he was throwing people away, unless he was hiding it very well, or he was doing a very good job of deceiving them, and that's what he's doing. So, and I also some little thing here is that for some reason in this game, you don't really last longer than one hunt. But I think there's a reason for that, and we'll get into that a little way later, another episode for sure. But I think the chosen hunters in this time frame would last longer than one hunt. I think they would go hunt, come back, and I think the hunter chief emblem is an example of that. They would show it to the gate would open, they would hunt again, I think they lasted, unless three things happened. They didn't all have to happen. One of these three things happened. Either Germon extended his offer to them for some reason, they found a way out of the dream, or they went mad themselves with insight or whatever. They lasted too long and they went mad. Or the only reason I don't think they could turn into beasts is because you can't turn into a beast in the game. And I think that's because of your chosen ability. The moon present won't let you. So you either have a choice. You can get really close to it. You can transform parts of your body, but you're able to control it. And because you're chosen, you can't really turn into a beast. But you can go mad. And I think going mad will take you out of the dream itself. So the question is, what triggers Germon's offer to the hunter, right? At the end of the game, he offers you a choice. So, spoiler alert, if you haven't beat the game, or you haven't seen any of the episodes where people have beaten the game, this is going to be a spoiler here. But he offers you, right? He says, I can end this for you, right? But what makes him decide that? Is it when he starts thinking you're going to become mad yourself, or when you start reaching the truth? Or, what kind of makes him start realizing that maybe it's when you decide to take in one of those umbilical cords. Because the game never makes you take in any, so that might not be true, right? For a second I thought it made you take in one, but it only, in fact, the game only forces you to find one of them. So maybe it's when you find one, right? Maybe he thinks that's the time that you need to end, or the moon presence really thinks it's the time. Not so much Germon, but the moon present thinks it's time to end you. This also kind of makes sense, because if Germon was the first hunter, he couldn't decide to kill himself. And I guess, you really could, I guess, if you wanted to. But so that means the moon present had to visit him. And since Germon may not have had 3 umbilical cords at the time or whatnot, he got the he got to sit in the chair and decide to be the guy who runs the place. So that kind of makes sense in that aspect. But he would end the night for you once you started figuring out really what the night was, right? He gave you the choice too, which is interesting. He let you choose. He doesn't just like straight attack you and try to kill you. He says, let me end this night for you, and you can either accept it and then move on, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean you're dead, because as the ending of the first ending shows, is that you do reappear in Yharnam after the hunt, after the night of the hunt. So he can end you, he can basically disconnect you from being the chosen one, and for doing all you're doing, you kind of get to live the next day. Well, it seems that way anyways. However, the Jura, the hunter that shoots at you as you enter Old Yharnam, and Eileen, the crow, the hunter of hunters, both seem to have dreamed before, but they don't seem to be attached to it anymore. Both have dialogues pertaining to that. Dejura says he dreams no longer, and Eileen tells you to say hi to the doll for her. I think she says that when you fight her. Dejura says the one he says when you meet him, when you go backwards and you meet him, so he doesn't attack you. So it seems both of these guys have seen the dream, the hunter's dream. Does it necessarily mean they found a way out, or did they just retain their memory once they were freed? It could be either one, because there's nothing that says you lose your memory of the hunter's dream once you're out of it. But, you know, that would mean these guys are pretty damn old. It could be, though. I mean, it's very possible. It could be why Eileen wants to hunt hunters of hunters, because she maybe feel remorse for them. May show why Dejura understands what's maybe going on a little bit more. Or maybe they just found a way out. Somehow or some way, you can actually disconnect yourself. I don't know. The other one, the one where I feel like they did their duty and then they were freed, may make more sense if I can speak right. But I guess, you know, you can choose either way, because in the end it doesn't really matter. They found a way out regardless, or they found a way to live through it or whatnot. Biggest thing is that they remember being in there, though. So, and then down in the Chalice dungeons, you fight two guys in one of the boss rooms. I forget which Chalice, which dungeon it is. It's one of the ones you go through. It's not a root dungeon that's random. It's an actual dungeon. You fight what they call a Mad Hunter, and then his like friend. And the Mad Hunter is using the exact weapons of Ludwig. He's using his holy sword and his gun. And then his friend is using the Kirk hammer, which all seems to be items from the church's workshop. To me, I really believe that this guy is Ludwig. This is Ludwig himself. He's gone mad down in the labyrinth, and I think that's how he disconnected himself. He did all these things over and over again, became a great hunter, but after a while he just gained enough insight or whatnot from fighting all these different beasts. Because every time you fight, in the game anyways, it seems like every time you fight a boss or you see something extraordinary like that, you get insight. Sometimes, if it depends on the boss, you get more or less. So over time, you're just going to gain insight just by fighting these things. Game mechanic maybe, but at the same time, you know, it is there. So over time, he's just gone crazy, and he finally went into the labyrinth, maybe for communion or whatnot, and he couldn't take it anymore, and he went mad, and that disconnected him from being a chosen one by just doing that. So for possibly a long time, there were hunters who were part of this line of hero, right? The church knows of these hunters. They know that they exist. These hunters are given access to the church workshop, maybe even given the Radiant Sword Hunter badge. That's why you find it there. The Healing Church and the hunters at this time they were allied. They were buds, because they needed each other, or else the moon presence wouldn't really have, well, the church wouldn't get what they wanted, and the moon presence are the ones that created the hunters. So yeah, they had to be allies. They were buddies. But sometime, and I forget where it says this, I have to look this up. I tried to look it up, I think, and I wasn't really able to find it. But in the game, something happens, and they end up splitting up. They break apart. I think it's on one of the hunter garbs, one of the black one or the white one, maybe. I just can't remember exactly. But eventually, we know that they split up, and the church doesn't regard them as friends anymore. In fact, this game has a lot of that. You got Willem and Lawrence, right? They kind of break apart. You got the Healing Church and the Hunters, which we were just talking about. Then you got the Healing Church and the Choir, right? They kind of split apart and do their own thing. And then you got the Choir and the School of Mensis. So it's funny that, you know, these things happen. And what I really think why the Healing Church and the Hunters split up And the reason why I think it happened, or I should say the Healing Church and the Moon Presence split up, quote unquote split up, because really the Hunter is part of the Moon Presence thing, right? But maybe the church even separated themselves from regular hunters, since that started happening too when Ludwig appeared. And I think that event was Lawrence's death. So that's going to be into that episode. We'll get into that next time. We'll definitely try to figure out what happened there and delve into Lawrence's death and how that all happened. It's very, very exciting time for Yharnam. This guy passed away, and I think a lot of power maybe shifted at this time, and kind of like, you know, things happened. Things started changing a lot with the Healing Church and the Hunters and the Moon Presence and all that crazy stuff. Because maybe once Lawrence died, the contract broke. So I hope you guys and gals and great ones are enjoying yourself. In the next episode, I'm going to talk about the fall of the Healing Church and the rise of really the choir. Also probably going to start talking about Bergenworth. I mean, what are they doing over there, twiddling their thumbs? We know at one point they finally get overrun or something happens and the church decides to shut the doors on them, and the only way to get in there is to know the old adage. This could have happened before Lawrence died, so we may talk about that first and then kind of get into Lawrence's death. We'll see. But a little update on the channel. I'm thinking about, I'm really prolonging this series, but it's because there's really nothing else to do out there right now. And I love this game. I've been playing it every day since it's been out. I've been playing this in Mortal Kombat 10, which there's not, I don't know, I don't think there's a lot to show with Mortal Kombat 10. You don't want to see it coming from me because I am not that great at the game, but it's a super fun game if you guys want to check out a fighting game that you don't necessarily have to play against people online. I do, but I'm just saying if you don't want to, you can still play it single player and get everyone's endings and all that great stuff. So it's a great game. But what I'm trying to get to is that on May 19th, Witcher 3 comes out. That's the day before my birthday. I'm super excited for that game. I already got it pre-ordered, got everything I want from it. So I was thinking about maybe I'll do some like videos before it, talking about maybe Witcher 1 and Witcher 2. That way we can be all prepared for Witcher 3 when it comes out and get into the story about that. I'm really thinking about doing that game. I haven't decided to get it for PC or console yet. I could get it for either one. PC obviously going to look probably better, but you know, I like sometimes just sitting on a couch and playing a game instead of having to, you know, sit on this computer chair and all this other stuff. And I know there's ways around that, people, but that's the way I look at it. So again, everybody, thank you for subscribing. At least everybody who has, and thanks for the likes. And as always, guys, peace.